We live in a time where masculinity is shamed, and men don't know what it means to be a man. As a pastor and counselor, I've spent the better part of my life equipping and training others. My goal with this show is to translate my hard-earned experience into tools and tactics to help you become stronger as a man. This is the BraveCo podcast. I'm your host, Jason Bellet. BraveCo men, welcome back to the BraveCo podcast. We are actually starting our prosperity and wealth series. And guys, I'm super pumped about this. We're talking about what it means for men to step into financial freedom, right? To break poverty mindsets and to build a legacy. I know that so many men that I know are in that stage of their life where they're asking this question, like, how do I actually build financial wealth? How do I look at it? How do I see it? And what are the practical steps to take? But what's the theology around it? And when we were designing this series, um, I just I have such a heart to see men be successful, to watch them be able to take care of their families, to watch them be able to extend the kingdom, and so that's why we're doing this. My first guest is a man that I respect a lot. I always tell you guys, like, I want to bring men on here that I look up to in a certain area of their life. And Chad Frantzen is one of those men. He is um, the founder of Wealth Builders. He is just a seasoned financial advisor and so much more. And so today he's going to come on here and I'm going to ask him all kinds of questions about what does it look like to build wealth, to protect your children's future, and to set yourself up to succeed. And so, Chad, thank you for coming on here, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, honored to be here, Jason. Love the BraveCo message and what you guys are doing. So excited to be here.
Thank you, man. Hey, listen, tell me, what was your journey in kind of creating wealth and building wealth in your life? Did you grow up with a father who helped you learn, or was that something that you had to kind of figure out on your own?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. I mean, I didn't grow up with wealth. I mean, my parents were both hardworking employees, what I call W-2 employees for an engineering, chemical plastics company, and they traded time for money, and so that's just kind of like work hard, right? And growing up, companies would take care of their workers
Yeah.
for a lifetime. That doesn't happen anymore. So, really my journey with that was just through business school. I went to business school at Texas A&M, started doing some internships for different financial companies, and just started asking a lot of questions of, well, how does this really work? How does money work? How do you make money work for you, and how do you make wise choices? But it was really in my early 20s that I started to learn that.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. This wasn't going to be my first question, but you made a statement. They were trading time for money. And
Yeah.
the average, I think the model, right? The average model for a man is that you trade time for money.
Yeah.
But maybe just take a second and, like, what do you mean by that? And why did you throw that out there? And what's a better way?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you caught that because that was one of my points I wanted to share. But, in there's a real lack of financial literacy in our educational system, and I'm speaking in the US.
Hmm.
But we don't have that. Even just personal economics, they don't teach that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, very rarely. Maybe if you're homeschooled and your parent is teaching you and saying, "Hey, we're going to learn some personal economics." But one of the things I started learning in my career, and especially in the last several years, as I partner with Billy Epperhart, who's a CEO for Andrew Womack Ministries and very, very gifted in financial things. He would always tell me, you need to stop trading time for money, and you need to trade value for money.
Mm.
And what he was saying is, in the US, trading time for money, that's all you have is time, right? And
Yeah.
so it's also the most heavily taxed form of income
Hmm.
is trading time for money. And what I learned from Billy and others is, well, if you have value that you can bring to the marketplace, and this can be any industry, you can be in ministry, you can be in manufacturing, teaching, but if you can bring value to it, then that's the exchange. And that might be 1 hour of time, it might be 10 minutes of time. But if you have value that someone deems worthy, then there's the transaction. And that's what I call being a kingdom entrepreneur, which
Hmm.
is what we try to talk a lot about at Wealth Builders.
What's like the first step of that? Like, what does that practically look like to get out of exchanging time for money to value for money? Are you talking about like become really excellent at one thing, or um, make investments that don't take a lot of your time, but create a lot of like where do you go with that for the average
Yeah.
guy?
Yeah, and I'm not advocating that people quit their, 9 to 5
Yeah,
job.
for
I mean, I
sure.
think there's a lot of stability in that with benefits and retirement. But if you think about, we talk about at Wealth Builders kind of this three different levels of the first level is making sense of money. And that involves getting out of debt, knowing what bad debt is, just learning how to do basic blocking and tackling, saving, giving, right. And then that's level one, just making sense of money. And level two is then you start making money.
Hmm.
And that usually, Jason, will be things that what we would call passive income. So if you read books like
Yep.
Robert Kiyosaki
Yep. For
and
sure.
others, it's thinking like, well, how this is a game, right? So how's the game set up in the US with the government and with the IRS, not to get too technical, where I can now make money based on what the rules of the game are. That's level two. And that's really what I'm talking about. And
Yeah.
then the third step, which we can get to later, is just making a difference. So making sense, level one, to make money, level two, and then making a difference, which is more Billy and I would say impact, kind of kingdom forward stuff. But that level two is really where we're having a lot of men say, hey, okay, how do I take that next step of just expanding my own personal finances to glorify God and take care of my family?
You said a second ago that we first have to understand money and understand how money works, and kind of the game. When I look at most men don't have a financial plan. They
Mhm.
And I'm super guilty of that. So I just to tell on
Yeah.
myself, yeah, I've been 20 years at Bethel Church this last year, and which has been awesome. And for 17 of those 20 years, I just didn't think at all about finances. In fact, I didn't charge for counseling or coaching. I'm just, how do I bring the kingdom? How do I help people out of their pit? How do I move the needle in helping people get well? And it wasn't until
Yeah.
um, 3 years ago, I was getting ready to go to Taiwan and speak a long trip, and my kids were sick. My little kids were sick, and on my way down to San Francisco, I had a long drive. My wife calls me and says, "Hey, we have $1,000 in the bank account," which is awesome if you're 15. It sucks if you're 30 or 40,
Yeah.
42 years old and you've got kids at home, And for me, it was like this breaking point in a good way where I remember texting some really close friends. I have really close friends that are actually, have uh, very kingdom minded, um, plans for finances. They're finance guys.
Yeah.
And I said, "Hey, fellas, this is where I'm at." Of course, they're like, "Hey, bro, if you need to borrow money, like, we got you." I said, "I don't need to borrow money. Like, I need to change the way that I'm doing my life because I don't want to be." If I look at what I've done for the last 20 years for a living, if I look 20 more years, the guys that are 65 years old, not 45, are having to travel and speak. They're having to write books. They have to continue to exchange time for money,
Yeah.
in order to feed their families. And I just started to go like, man, I don't want my life to be like that. And so it was a really good reckoning for me to start going like this thing that I haven't wanted to do. I watched my dad be in business my whole entire life when I was young,
Yep.
and the pressure and the stress of leadership, and that I just went like, I don't want to do any of that. So
I don't want any of that.
I'll just do this thing. And then you realize like, oh shoot, this thing that I've been doing forever,
Yeah.
it doesn't have a future plan. I actually have to serve this one thing forever. And it's not really what I want to do. And so I feel like there's a lot of guys that are in my boat that are just, they're doing the 9 to 5. And by the way, today, like, you really can't there for the most part, like, I can't just work a 9 to 5. I don't make enough money to live in California on my 9 to 5. I have to either have my wife work or do a side hustle on top of that, and a lot of my friends are in that boat as well. But why do you feel like most men don't have a good financial plan?
Well, I mean, let's face it, as men, it's a lot easier just to say, I'm just going to go put some money in Bitcoin or Nvidia
Yeah,
or, whatever the thing is that your guys are talking about and not have a plan, right? It's almost like the default operating system for men. It's like, oh yeah, I'll just throw a little money at that, throw a little money at this. And I've been guilty of that absolutely many
yeah,
times. I mean, my accreditations as a certified financial planner, what I would tell you as an industry, what our industry has not done well is to simplify it and give men clarity, men and women clarity on how to do a financial plan. Our industry, and I've been in it for over 2 decades now, we make things so complicated that Jason can't go do it on his own. He's
yeah,
gotta come pay somebody a lot of money. I'll give you an example, like, there's financial planning software out there, and it'll create, like, a 50-page document that no one's gonna read,
yeah, it's
right?
true.
You're gonna it's like legal jargon, and so what I've started doing, I feel like the Lord's directing me is, "Hey, what if" let's take, for example, your situation. What if someone could just create a one-page financial plan
Yeah,
that you and your wife could look at, maybe quarterly, talk about it on a date night, maybe you update it once a year, and it's only one page, bullet points. Um, that's a lot, easier for us as men to say, "Okay, I can tackle that."
yeah.
And, I think that's two points that I've seen of why we don't wanna create a financial plan.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, it's so complicated. They've made it so complicated that you have to either have a professional to do it or spend so much time researching how to do it that it becomes very, very complicated. And I've noticed just being a counselor for 20 years, like, if if there's more than one target to hit, if you have to hit more than one target, most people can't do it. And so even in counseling, I have to lay things out in such a way that there's just one target to hit this week. Just do this first step and then come back and let's do this next step. What would you say are the building blocks of creating a good financial plan?
Yeah, I mean, I think, just understanding how debt works. Surprisingly, a lot of men of all generations, they don't really understand, the difference between good debt and bad debt. Like, we have these conversations at Wealth Builders, like, there's the Dave Ramsey modality that says, "Hey, all debt is bad," and
Yeah,
poor dad mindset of, well, there is bad debt, but there's also what we call leverage, which is good. And so if Jason wanted to get into buying real estate or starting businesses, he could actually use the bank's money to help underwrite where he doesn't have to use his own money. So I think some of it is education, really. Particularly in Christendom, we kind of go with the I don't want to be enslaved to debt, and we're not, and we should not to be clear. But there is a way where I would say there's good debt that's just leverage that can help you expand a business or expand a portfolio. I think that's number one. And I think just that lack of literacy has really been a hindrance. But the building blocks, if you can understand the basics of a budget, and that's really that level one of making sense of money of, hey, we need more inflows and outflows.
yeah,
I know that sounds silly, but it's like
that's
we need
true.
to see that, communicate it with our spouse of a, and then, hey, can we live on 80% of what we're taking in? Can we give 10% or more? It's really learning that first piece of, okay, well, we're not making enough income W-2 wise, what else can we do to raise that doesn't mean I have to go take a night shift and not be at home with my family?
No, that makes sense. Um, I guess when it comes to debt, like that's a scary thing, right? I'm just
Yeah.
looking at just kind of the way that I feel like it's been portrayed uh, for so long. Going and even purchasing a rental home to to rent out and is like, oh man, what happens if I can't rent it? What happens if a bunch of things break? All that kind of stuff. Like, how do you figure out like what type of debt you should take? Like, how much risk should you take, and how much? Do you know what I'm asking? Like,
Oh, yeah.
how do you make that kind of decision?
Well, I mean, there's definitely some formulas that we teach at Wealth Builders on that, but you think about the parable of the talents, right? I mean,
Hmm.
the guy with one talent did not want to risk, right?
Yeah.
And so he buried it. And so I think, the guy with the 5 and the 10, he used some measure of risk to, um, there's a scripture in Luke 19 where Jesus says, go and do business until I come.
Mm,
Right. So I think there's a mandate of, hey, whatever resources God's put in your hands, it could be ideas. It doesn't have
yeah.
to be money. It could be ideas, right? It could be things you could patent or produce. Don't think just money. Um,
That's cool. Yeah.
but I think, you know what I'm saying, Jason?
Yeah.
So it's like, well, how could we expand that? And it's really about running the numbers. And so let's take real estate, for example. I want to buy a commercial office building. It's $500,000 or whatever. And I can either wait until I save up $500,000 and then, which might be never,
Yeah, for sure.
or I could save up maybe 50,000 or 100,000. And if I went to the bank's not loaning on Jason, they're loaning on the asset.
Yeah.
So they're looking at the opposite. They're looking at you, but they're really looking at the asset. Hey, if Jason walks away, the bank says, "Hey, we get the building." So
Hmm.
that's an asset-backed loan, which to me as a steward, that's a good way to steward resources, of saying, "Hey, we're going to steward a $500,000 asset with maybe 50,000, 100,000 of my own dollars, but that asset's going to pay passive rental income above and beyond what I have to pay the bank and what I have to pay in taxes and insurance. And if you're providing a good home for people or a quality office building, there's additional benefits. So again, I get it, but I think some of the most successful kingdom investors we've seen is they've taken a thoughtful approach
Yeah.
to how to work with a bank, how to use leverage. And again, I don't tell people to do this right out of the gate.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is more level 2. I think level 1 is just understanding your own personal household financially, your budget, having the basics covered.
Well, I'll give maybe a good example in the level one category of thinking outside the box. That's a bit less risk, but I have a really good friend that I help to mentor on a regular basis. And he came to me, I don't know, a month or two ago. And we were just talking about his finances and where he's at in his life and the things that he enjoys. And he was currently exchanging time for money in the sense that he loves to do counseling or coaching, and he's really good at it, but he's doing one-to-one, 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 so he's charging whatever, $75 an hour to do a counseling appointment, which is fine. There's no problem with that, and you can make good money doing that. The challenge is he only has so much time. So his counseling, he's counseling on top of his other work that his 9 to 5 job. And so I said, hey man,
Yeah.
why don't you create a course? And
Mhm.
why don't you create a course? It take you a tiny bit of time, but you already have it in you. You're really good at it. His specialty is walking men through pornography and addiction, essentially, and helping them to build, a strong, healthy, powerful life. And I said, I'll partner with you. I'll help you. I'll do some advertising for you for free just because I love you. And you can get 5 guys or 6 guys or 8 guys that are willing to pay you that same $75 every single week to sit in a group and to do group counseling. It doesn't The risk is really low, right? So all he has to do is I'm essentially find 2 guys that want to meet with him, and he's doubled his money.
Yeah.
And so I just talked to him today, and he was like, "Hey, I got 2 groups of guys. I got 3 in one group, and I've got I have 5 in another group." And what I told him was like, "Hey, what you were charging, double it." So, anyway, so he said, "I didn't have anyone ask me about the extra money." I said, "Yeah, because the course you put together is worth the money. That's why I told you to double it.
Right.
You're still lower than what anybody else is charging for this, and you're making triple the money or even more than that with the same amount of time." And I really, that's one of the things that I started to do 3 years ago was to go, okay, at first I did one-on-one counseling just to close that gap. I need an extra $2,000 a month. How can I do that? Well, I can take 4 appointments or whatever. And so then I started to go, I only want to do that as little as possible. What's the
Yeah.
next best thing, right? Well, the next best thing is groups. How can I do 2 groups? And then for me, I did that for a while. And then what's the next best thing? To produce a product where people are consuming it and I don't have to be there. I just have to create it one time. And so for me, these are the steps, like the really practical steps that my wife and I started to take to dig ourselves out of this. Like we're negative, we need to get to positive. First step, just do one-on-one counseling is the quickest, easiest thing, and to charge a reasonable rate for it. Next one for us was, okay, how do I do group coaching? And then beyond that, we started a podcast and created a community and started to produce products that have helped. But I think these are the types of things that are some of the building blocks if guys are out there. And it doesn't have to be the same
Yeah.
type of thing, right? Like guys may not have a course or
No.
whatever, but I think thinking and changing the way that you think, which is what you're talking about from, okay, I go in and I work for an hour and I get $20 for my hour that I worked. What's a way that I can scale and double that? So that yeah, it's a great thought.
That's good. Well, and really that's to me, Jason, that's in what I call intellectual property,
Yeah.
right? So God has given you an idea through direct revelation, experience, and you know, we say, name it. If you name it, you own it. So if
Mm.
you can name the process, let's say, I like this. If you can name the process of how you walk a man across the bridge over a certain type of addiction and
Yep.
you have a process for it, you
Yep.
name it, right? And then that's really intellectual property the Lord's given you. And you could license it, you could train other men to do that and offer it, right? There's all sorts of ways. Like even at our firm, since Billy Epperhart and I partnered up, our firm's probably 3x'd in size, which I can't say I really wanted because it there's all sorts of new things I have to do that I don't think I'm prepared and equipped for, but I'm now mentoring other advisors
Mm.
to say, "Hey, here's kinda how I've done it. Here's some of my unique ways." And then they can take it, kinda mold it to them, and then kinda like Jesus, send them out 2
Yeah.
by 2. Like, this is what we're called to do is kingdom, what we call kingdom finance and wealth building, and I think it's the same way even in counseling or
Yeah.
athletic coaching, anything.
What would you say was like the key to 3xing it?
Well, if the short answer would be meeting Billy Epperhart. I mean, that was a divine connection. I met Billy through Lance Wallnow, who's a dear friend and mentor. And I think for me, it was just being obedient to what God had called me to do.
Was there
Um,
something
I
practically
had a
that
small,
that Billy did that helped you?
say that again.
Was there something practical that Billy did that helped you like that or was it yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely Billy, Lance had really prophetically, spend time with me and was like, Chad, you need to stay in the business mountain and you need to go up higher in it. And, sometimes God just has a divine connection, right? There's a
Yeah.
Kairos moment. And when I met Billy, Billy really encouraged me, hey, you need to stop being a practitioner and start being what he would say, the owner's box. You need to start operating from the owner's box. If you think about an NFL football game, like
Yeah.
the owner's box. So that was super helpful for me, Jason, of like, I needed to start thinking bigger and differently than just, hey, how can I help Jason and his family? But how, start thinking at it almost like a CEO of, well, how, a visionary of how can we expand this work and this mission, which I had not done previously.
It's really interesting because I think on any level that works, when you give yourself permission to think a bit bigger. And I remember when I started leading BraveCo the first year or two, I didn't want to be the leader. I kept trying to find somebody else that would be the number one
Yeah.
person. It's just not my natural isn't I'm going to be the lead guy. I've always been a really, really great number two because I have a dad that's a really strong number one. So I was always, and so it wasn't until probably the third year where I started to get comfortable in, okay, I'm not going to find somebody that's going to lead BraveCo. Like I have to settle in to this idea that God's going to God's equipped me for at least this season in BraveCo to be the leader. And now I need to start thinking in ways that make me uncomfortable, but make me step out and believe with him. And I think that a lot of times that's the barrier, right? Because if you start to think in a way that you haven't thought before, even simply like, how could I how could I add an extra 10% of revenue to to my life right now? Well, you start to ask guys that question. You start to look around, right? You look at a guy who has he's double what you are, and you go, "Hey, how did you do that? Hey, can you explain this to me? Hey, I don't understand debt really. Can you explain it to me?" Or, "Hey, I've been thinking about." It's like whatever you start really dreaming about, you begin to spot and notice other people. For instance, if you buy a white Toyota truck, all of a sudden you see white Toyota
Yeah,
trucks everywhere.
exactly. Yeah.
But until you start to dream in that direction and allow yourself to be uncomfortable and get through that fear, the fear of, man, if I mess up, it's going to cost me a lot. I don't know that I even understand it or know how to do it. And I think that's what the younger generation, uh, on some level has on us. When you hit that like 26, 27, 28, you start to go like, "Man, it took me a lot to get here. I don't wanna mess it up." But,
Yeah.
like, my
Feels
21-year-old
risky.
it
Feels
is.
risky at that age, but it's really not.
My
Yeah.
21-year-old son has been, he moved back in with us recently. He's awesome. W we helped him do some financial, planning, and he's doing really great. And the other day, he came out of his room, and I was like, "Oh, what are you doing in there?" He's like, "Oh, I'm learning how to day trade." And I was like, "Oh, really? Tell me about
Yeah.
that." And he's like, "Oh, I pay $90 a month for this program, and I trade live, but, I don't keep the money. I have to earn $3,000 trading live, in order to be able to keep the account." Anyways, he's being mentored in this, and what I love is that he thinks that he can do that.
Love it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so then because he's trying something, the only thing he's risking is his $90, right? Like, but for him, it's this investment that he goes like, "No, if I can learn how to do this and get really confident." And there's a whole bunch of rules, so they're teaching him like, you're not trying to hit a big
Yeah.
win, you're trying to make really, really small wins every single day, and you actually get kicked out if you try to risk everything. Anyways, but I have a friend who day traded for 15 years, and so I'm now able to connect them, right? Because
Yeah.
what my friend has learned over 15 years, he can give my son in a smaller chunk of time. Anyways, the only reason why that's happening is because my son thinks he can and has
Yeah.
started to think bigger. And I really, as soon as you said that, I went, yeah, that's it, man. You get around
Yeah.
other people who give you hope for that next 10% or that
Well,
next,
it'll rub off on you,
it
you know?
will. Yeah, it's true. What are some of your core values around when you're building wealth? I think the other thing is a lot of men are afraid, we have this idea that 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 building wealth is the root of all evil, right? Like and so again, I just think we have such bad theology in the kingdom right now. Like, what are some of your core principles, core values that are helping you along in this journey?
Yeah. That's so true. I said that, it's the love of money, that's the root of evil, and it's why Jesus talks so much about it, right? And one of my favorite Bill Johnson quotes um, is, when he Bill would talk about, how much money is enough, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
for the rich young ruler, it was a certain amount, but for Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, who were they were a wealthy to do family, it was a different amount. And I just love Bill's take on this is like, it's whatever amount replaces your trust in Jesus.
Dude,
And so
it's just so
that could be a
convicting.
million, that could be 100,000, that could be 100 million.
Yeah.
And that's really guided me. I always go back to that of like, yeah, that's why Jesus taught so much about it. It's like, well, there's a spirit of mammon, but there's also the spirit of the kingdom. And so our opportunity with money is just, it's an opportunity with Jesus
Yeah.
deeper, because the kingdom is well beyond just the church, right? The kingdom, these outposts of the kingdom, they're in men's groups that meet at a coffee shop. They're in downtown where people are doing street ministry. They're in government, education, business, right? Those are all outposts of the kingdom. So I think for me, what changed me, Jason, was I was considering getting out of the business several years ago. I was just burned out. I didn't like the greed. I didn't like the
Yeah.
materialism. And I only way I can say is I had an encounter with the Lord.
Wow.
And um, that was before I met Billy, really before I knew Lance that well. And what Jesus told me, he said, you can get out of the business. Or if you stay in the business, if you let me show you how to do it, you will enjoy it.
Hmm.
Cause I was like, well, maybe I want to go get my, MDiv and go into missions and,
Yeah.
you just get to that point where like, this is crap. Like,
Yeah.
why do people covet money this way? And why do they fire you when
Yeah.
don't call them back at midnight? Just so
Yeah.
I think it's that piece of just like what we do now is when I think through a portfolio of investing in companies, I think of it as, well, Jason, we're going to own shares. There's an ownership piece if we buy Starbucks or Walt Disney.
Hmm.
Um, I'm much more apt to go in Starbucks and buy a cup of coffee, even though I don't agree with their worldview and their policies. I would way more buy Starbucks coffee at the airport than I would go buy their stock, because then it's ownership and I'm yoked to what they're doing.
Hmm.
So that has helped me. And we could talk at length on that of, well, if God's given me resources to steward versus someone who's just worldly, why shouldn't I steward them well and try to gain more resources to help the kingdom and choose not to invest in some of these, we call them woke companies, just liberal
Yeah.
worldview. They're just, they're anti-church, right? They're
Yeah.
anti-Judeo-Christian worldviews. Like, well, why shouldn't we as conservative Christians be involved in that story and be in that conversation of,
Yeah.
hey, maybe we could have a say at what Netflix does.
Yeah.
If we say, hey, we don't like the programming at Netflix, but we want to own your stock. Yeah, I'm just using that as an
Yeah.
example,
Yeah.
but
No, I think that that's really wise. In a lot of ways, the church has been really behind because of us being so unequipped, so afraid, and misunderstanding scripture. And in another podcast, just so you guys know, I'll get way into the theology behind wealth. My dad and I are going to go deep into that. My dad being the expert, not me. But I think that the things that we fear and misunderstand, the problem is that you get so behind in it that now I'm not able to really steward and leverage and maximize the opportunity that's supposed to be created right through it. We're supposed to be co-laborers with Christ, and man, if you're afraid of wealth, if you're afraid of prosperity, if you have a ton of guilt and bad theology, then you live an unprosperous life and think that somehow like that's more healthy, that's more holy than the guy who is prospering, and it just gets into this really crazy mindset. I'm curious, Chad, what are some habits that um, yeah, that set Wiseman apart from, just the average guy?
Well, I need to be asking you that question. I'd like for you to answer that to me, help me. I think most of my mentors, what I have what I have learned from most of my mentors through the years is there's just a level of humility
Mhm.
in how they carry themselves. And, they're not wearing a Rolex, right? They could. They have been very successful, but the ones that I've learned the most from, there's just this level of humility
Mhm.
about them that, although it's cliche when we say, well, God owns everything, it's like, no, well, but he actually does. Like, if I lose money on an investment, you just say, hey, that was God's. It didn't
Yeah.
work out. I'm going to get back up and try it again, as opposed
Yeah.
to say, oh, I'm never going to invest in stocks or real estate because I got burned. I
Yeah.
think that's, part of it. And, as Bethel talks a lot about, it's just having that heart of generosity of, hey, is there a way I could grow my resources to where it would enable me to give more to a ministry or to an orphanage? Like, wouldn't that be awesome to talk about as a
Mhm.
family with my kids to say, hey,
Mhm.
we're investing in this thing, real estate, whatever, but, you know, a portion of those profits we're going to use to go help feed the poor or go
Yeah.
help translate Bibles. I think that's part of just even the habits of that. Of how do we talk about it with the family? How do
Yeah.
I talk about it with my kids of, well, this, my kids always ask me like, what do? You do something with money. Like, you manage money. What do you do? Like, you're always talking to people. And, my first grade daughter, her teacher was asking her, well, what does your daddy do? And she's like, well, he has this job and this job and this job. And then I went and talked to the first grade teacher and she says, what do you do, sir, Mr. Franzen? Cause your daughter says you have all these jobs, right?
That's
And I was
amazing.
like, well, I'm an entrepreneur. I own different businesses that do different things. And then the teacher's like, oh, okay. Cause I thought you had like 5 jobs, but so I think it's how we talk about it with our kids is a great habit of inviting them
Mhm.
into that of like, hey, here's what mommy and daddy do. Here's why we don't spend a lot of money here. Here's why we do invest here. I think that's a huge habit,
Yeah.
just having those conversations early.
It's great. Yeah. I think the people ultimately that we admire the most in life are people that consistently delay gratification. And I think about that a lot. Um, and you look at Jesus just constantly delaying gratification. Not my will. I'm not on my mission. I'm not doing I'm not doing what I want to do. I'm obedience is better than sacrifice. I mean, he just has all these
Yeah.
things of like I am just constantly day by day um delaying gratification in order to better tomorrow. Is tomorrow is my tomorrow going to be better for this decision? That's constantly a question I think that all of us men need to be asking ourselves is how do I live today in a way that sets me up tomorrow? And I think that i- if you can answer that question on a day by day basis. I remember I was in the middle of my divorce and I called my dad and I had two options. Um, and I said to my dad, like, I don't know which option's right, option A or option B. And he said, um, I don't know which option's right, but I do know which option's wrong. It's like, oh, that's a really good thought. That's all I needed. And I think for me, the habit that I want to do every single day is I want to live in such a way that keeps me really focused and present today so that I steward what I have today, but in a way that sets me up for tomorrow. And so just constantly doing that in every area of my life, in my marriage, with my kids,
Mm.
with my finances. And then I think the second thing that I would add to what you said is um this is something I tell I was telling a married couple yesterday. If you could have figured out this problem on your own, you had already done it. You'd already done it.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you've been alive
Right.
for 45 years. You've been married for 12 years. If you guys could have solved this on your own, you had already done it. There's no shame in it. Get into a habit of pulling on the people around you, finding the person that's better, finding the program that's better, investing, whatever. invest $1,000 into the growth of your marriage, invest $1,000 into the growth of your finances, invest $1,000 into the growth of whatever thing it is, your physical health. But the question of what can I delay today that's going to bring me a massive benefit tomorrow sometimes is my ego. I don't want anyone else to see that I don't know what I'm doing. And so I have to, which is a natural human thing. It's not evil. It's this, I don't want anybody to think I'm dumb. You don't want anyone to think that you're dumb. We all battle with, on some level, just our humanity, and being able to go like, nah, this thing is trying to protect me isn't helpful. It's actually going to hurt me in the long run. I want to I want to get out of this box of comfort that I've been living in. And guys, I think that as we kind of wrap this up, we don't have to be perfect in our finances. We don't have to be perfect in our marriage. We don't have to be perfect with our kids. We have to be intentional, right? We have to be intentional in our finances. And today I want you guys to start thinking about, what do I need to do today to start building tomorrow? For some of you, you're already on that level too. You've been managing a budget for a long time. You know where your finances are, and it's time to take a risk. It's time to like, okay, how can I 2x this? How can I 3x this? How can I, maybe join the wealth builders program and have someone take you through what are some ways that you can actually leverage your money today in order to build a better tomorrow. Okay. Some of you guys are in step one where you're going, man, I have bad theology about money. I run from it. That was me. I don't want to see my finances because it's stressful. It's overwhelming. I know where it's at. It's somewhere in the red, but it's not in the black.
Yeah.
And so I just didn't look at it. And I did other things that made me feel really productive and I felt powerful over. And you have to have a reckoning one way or another, like I did, where you go, oh shoot, I don't have any money. That's the wrong kind to have. Or you go, okay, I'm going to face this fear, this thing that I feel really powerless in, and step up and get some training and get used to looking at your budget, get used to figuring out where all your money's going, and making a plan to get out of that hole and manage your money really well. Chad, did you want to add anything to that while we're in here?
Yeah, I love that. I think it's important for the listeners to know that you're not too late
Yeah,
and you don't need to worry about comparison. I think comparison often keeps us out of the game from going to counseling, right?
it's
Or
true.
getting into investing or so I think oftentimes the enemy will just say, it's too late for you, bro.
Mhm.
Or you don't have a degree. I just want to name that as
That's great.
that's just the enemy. It's not too late. The Lord can bring you people around you in your network to help you with advice. And, as Billy and I say at Wealth Builders, the step one is just getting in the game,
Mm,
just get in the game. And if that means, it's just like going to counseling. Like, how do I get in the game with my marriage and my family? Well, I might need to pay for 5 or 6,
yep.
sessions with a counselor. That's getting in the game. It's the same way with finances. Don't worry about, oh man, I got to get way down here where Chad and Jason were. Just think, well, let's just get in the game and little steps, right? What the Lord says, just the next 2 steps. I just echo what you've shared there. I think that's important
It's great,
for the
man.
listener.
Chad, thank you so much, man, for coming on today, for pouring just your years of wealth and knowledge and grace to our men. BraveCo men, I love what Chad just said. Get in the game. Let's all just take the first step, get in the game, be that man in the arena, be willing to get dusty, dirty, scared, but get back in control and steward this thing that Jesus talked about so much, the Bible talks about so much, but become a really good steward of what God's given you today and continue to go on this journey with us. We're going to unfold a whole bunch of more things like the theology and then even some more practicals, digging deeper into the practicals around how to steward your wealth and get to a place where you're able to leave your kids uh, something that they can then continue to build upon. So, guys, have an incredible week. We will see you next week on the BraveCo podcast.
Hey, BraveCo men. Hopefully you loved this week's episode. Listen, if you have not subscribed to our podcast, you are already behind. Go ahead and click right here to subscribe to our podcast. And if you have not watched last week's episode, you can click right here and watch last week's episode. And listen, if you want to upgrade your wardrobe, you can check out some of our new hats that we have in stock and all our other swag. Go to braveco.org and you can look at our store there. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.